little bit more with Elise. She's a Murrow Press Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and author of the must-read Cosmopolitics on Substack. Elise, thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be here with you.
Look, the question that so many people have is, are we seconds away from some sort of order being given or some sort of button being pressed and the United States entering this, or do you think it could be a little bit of time here?
I think it's going to play out for a while, okay? What we've heard before about these B-2 bombers, that's really the big asset that the U.S. has. And we should be clear, the president is moving a lot of assets to the region, mostly for defensive purposes, okay, to defend U.S. Interests in the Gulf, in the region, troops in the region, to also defend Israel. The main thing that the U.S. has that could help the Israelis are these bunker-busting bombs, and they would have to be used by B-2 bombers. Right now, I think they're in Missouri. And so it would take a while to turn it around and get them there. That's really what we should look for to see that the U.S. is getting more serious about this. I mean, it's pretty clear the president wants to keep that, you know, what we call in diplomacy strategic ambiguity. He wants to just keep everybody guessing what he's going to do. But diplomacy is still going on. The Iranians are going to be meeting with the Germans, the French, and the Brits. They call it the EU3, the countries that are really the biggest, that have the most diplomacy with Iran. They're going to be meeting with the foreign minister and the EU kind of foreign policy apparatus in Geneva towards the end of the week. And so they're giving this time to play out. I mean, look, the president is hoping that the threat of the U.S. getting involved with Israel, that's going to be, it's really going to be the only thing, Gadi, that gets Iran to the table. And that's going to be a pretty hard pill for the Iranians to swallow. They're basically being given a choice: regime survival or your nuclear program. You can't have both.
And it does seem like the Iranians are not being silent about any of this. Like, we're seeing a lot of the rhetoric, the statements that are made, the propaganda that's out there. They're showing pictures of a lot of drones that look like they're still hidden in some of the mountains, some of the missiles, touting that they still have ballistic missiles. Is that posturing? Does it look like they still have a sizable arsenal? Or?
Oh, they still have a sizable arsenal. But don't forget, they're meeting Trump where he is with his rhetoric. I mean, he's threatening to kill the Iranian supreme leader. What are they going to say? Oh, thanks, we're waiting for that. You know, they're going to meet his rhetoric where he is. And, you know, the Iranians do not want the U.S. to get involved in this war. They want to try and at least let the U.S. think that they're willing to have diplomacy while they figure out what they're going to do. But the Iranians still have a sizable arsenal. About 1 in 10 missiles is getting through to the Israelis, and they're inflicting a lot of damage. They're causing a lot of casualties. And so this could go on for a while, I think, before the U.S. is really ready to get involved. The U.S. is not going to get involved to protect Israel from these missiles. They are helping them shoot down. They're not going to do a preemptive strike against Iran for that. The real question is this underground facility in Fordow, which is in the kind of deep underground inside a mountain. And the only thing that could really make that significant damage, even if it may not even destroy it. And I think President Trump wants to know that, is this going to be a home run, or is some of the Iranian program going to be left standing and then I'm going to be kind of left vulnerable?
Yeah, no, we've seen people in Iran and Iran, they don't want the United States involved. People here in the United States, they don't want the United States involved, some of them. And yet, when you look at some of the billboards in Tel Aviv, I think we've got some of those pictures. Some of them are saying, finish the job, talking to the president, President Trump, as we understand it, right? So what is the sentiment, and does that carry weight in the White House? I don't
think that what Israel wants the U.S. to do carries any weight in the White House, because you saw over the last few months, President Trump has taken a lot of actions that are kind of against what Israel wants, whether it's a deal with the Houthis to not attack U.S. forces in the region that didn't include protections for Israel, or, you know, negotiating with Hamas to release a U.S. citizen, or lifting sanctions against Syria. He's a very America First president. If President Trump determines that, you know, Iran is going for a nuclear weapon, he'll help Israel take it out. But he's not going to do it for Israel. He's going to do it because he thinks that's in the best interest.
Elise, let me ask you this. You know, and based on everything that we've seen, this is a very transactional president, right? Could you see the president going to Israel and saying, hey, you know what, we're gonna drop these bunker busters, but there's got to be something in it for the United States based on some of the diplomacy that we've seen in the past. Like, what would that look like? What would the ask be there?
I don't think bombing Iran. I mean, I love that idea, that the creativity of it. And I could see President Trump on a whole host of issues say, OK, make a peace deal. You know, do this for me, do that for me, and I'll
possibly in Gaza, because I mean, it does seem like Iran. I mean, it does seem like the Trump administration has been sideways.
No, you're 100% right. President Trump is very transactional, but going to war with Iran is a whole nother ball of wax. I mean, don't forget, and you talked about, you know, this tussle between Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson. President Trump is kind of caught between a rock and a hard place with his base, because he's not really an isolationist. He's more of, you know, someone who, you know, wants to take action only when it's needed and then take hard action. But his base, you hear, he's kind of in the middle, also on Ukraine, and so President Trump isn't just going to do this. You know, he campaigned against these forever Mideast war. This would be a forever Mideast war. This is probably the most consequential decision President Trump will take in his presidency. I know he'd love to make a deal on diplomacy and get his Nobel Peace Prize that he'd really love. What I could see him doing is offering transactional things to the Iranians. And you've kind of seen, like with these talks, look at all the economic benefits you could get. You know, yes, you'd be giving up your nuclear program, but I could give you so much else in return. And I think, you know, that's the kind of conversations that Steve Witkoff, maybe the Europeans, are having with the Iranians. It's all about, if they're going to be willing to give up their nuclear facilities, their real enrichment programs, the heavy stuff, or they can have regime survival. But again, they can't have both.
Elise Labott, always appreciate hearing what you
with you.
think. And yeah, I can't wait to hear what you write next.
Thanks
Elise,
very
thank
much.
you.